I'm Amelia Thompson, 34 years old, and I've never seen my sister's face go pale like that. The yellow envelope sat on the table between us like it had teeth. My mother's grip on her purse tightened with every word the lawyer said, and my father wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. That whole room fell silent as the truth came out about who really owned everything. I didn't expect to find my life rewritten in a legal file folder. But there it was, staring back at me like it had been waiting all this time before I tell you what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever been pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to lift you up 6 months earlier. I was in my apartment downtown sipping cold coffee and editing a museum catalog when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Margaret Thompson rarely called unless something needed fixing, and sure enough, her voice came through as crisp and polished as ever. "Amelia, dear, we need you at the house this weekend. Family meeting, it's important." Before I could ask anything, the line went dead. That was how she operated, neat, clean, and always on her own terms. I grew up in a house where image was everything. Our father, Richard Thompson, built Thompson Construction from a 3-man crew into a $75 million empire. The house reflected that 5 acres of pristine lawn, a 3-story Georgian mansion, and a circular driveway wide enough for galas. But behind the symmetry and chandeliers was a different story, one where love came with conditions, and praise was a scarce commodity. Natalie, my older sister, had been the golden child since the start. She shadowed our father in meetings at 12, learned about real estate before she could drive while I painted landscapes and read old novels in my room. "Natalie understands what it takes to build something real," he'd say proudly. Meanwhile, my straight-A report cards collected dust in drawers. I majored in art history, moved to the city, built a quiet life at the museum. I didn't have family dinners or foundation galas, but I had my own space, my own peace. The day of the family meeting, I drove 40 minutes in my old Honda, past neighborhoods that seemed to belong to another lifetime as I pulled up the drive. Natalie's black SUV already sat parked at an angle. Like it owned the place. It probably did. Isabel greeted me at the door, her smile, one of the few in that house that ever felt real. "They're in the dining room, Miss Amelia," she said, and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Inside, the room was set for 4. Father at the head, Mother on his right, Natalie on his left, and me at the far end, physically and metaphorically. "Amelia, you're looking bohemian," my mother noted with a glance at my blouse and jeans. Natalie smiled like a magazine ad, all business and polish. "Thanks for coming, sis." We made it through small talk about the weather and city traffic, until my father finally cleared his throat. His voice carried the same edge I remembered from childhood. "We've decided to make the transition official. Natalie will take over the business. We've signed over everything." The words landed with the weight of stone. I kept my expression steady. "May I ask why now?" my mother jumped in. "Darling, you've chosen a different path. You're not built for this world." "Don't worry," Natalie added. "I'll find you a spot in the foundation. Maybe something with art programs." My hands stayed folded in my lap. "I have a career, Natalie. I don't need a favor." "This emotional reaction proves our point," my father said flatly. "The decision is made. We're simply informing you out of respect." I nodded. One stood up. "Congratulations, Natalie. I'm sure you'll run it just like Dad did." They watched me leave, waiting for tears or raised voices. I gave them none, but when I got to my car and closed the door behind me, that first tear fell like a silent admission. This time, it really was over. The night after the family dinner, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of traffic outside my apartment window. The sounds of the city felt steadier than anything I'd heard at that long mahogany table. I'd said congratulations, smiled, excused myself with grace, but the words wouldn't stop echoing. "Everything has been signed over to Natalie." That wasn't just an announcement. It was a line drawn in ink, not just between us, but around me. The days that followed blurred together. I went to work, answered emails, scheduled artifact deliveries. At the museum, everything ran on logic, on records, on preservation. In that world, facts mattered. At home, it had never worked that way. Gabriella noticed first. She was cataloging a set of early American silver with me when she glanced over and said, "You've been quiet all week. Like unusually quiet. What happened?" I didn't want to explain, but she waited silent until I finally looked up and said, "They gave it all to her. The company, the house, every cent." Gabby didn't say anything right away. She just reached for another label sticker and pressed it down, slow, careful. "You surprised?" I shook my head. "No, but it still hurt. Work kept me busy. That helped." We were prepping for the new exhibition, and I'd been put in charge of the American Wings winter rotation. That meant long hours under gallery lights, late evenings adjusting display cases, and an inbox full of curators asking for extensions. It was the kind of chaos I liked, controlled, focused. Then Natalie called. I was in the archives when my phone buzzed with her name. I considered ignoring it, but something told me she'd keep calling. "Amelia," she chirped. "Just checking on my baby sister. You wouldn't believe the deal we closed, $30 million for the Henderson expansion. Daddy's thrilled. We're flying to Aspen this weekend to celebrate." I waited for the courtesy question about my life. It never came. "That's nice," I said. "I'm working." "Oh, right. Your little museum job?" She laughed. "Try not to work too hard arranging dusty paintings." I hung up before I said anything I'd regret. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, bills spread out in front of me. My rent was due. Student loan payments were climbing again. I had a decent salary enough to keep me afloat, but there was never much left. I opened the bank app, stared at the number, and then closed it again. A news alert popped up on my phone. Natalie and my father were standing together grinning in a ribbon-cutting photo. "Thompson Construction expands west," the headline read. In the picture, my mother stood behind them, polished as ever in pearls and a navy coat. I closed the article. The next month, I went to my mother's birthday dinner at a restaurant so exclusive the chairs were probably custom upholstered. I'd spent half a week's paycheck on a silver bracelet, had it gift-wrapped, and wrote her a card in my best handwriting. "How thoughtful," she said, setting it aside without opening the envelope. Natalie handed over a diamond necklace 5 minutes later. "Oh, Natalie, it's exquisite." "Richard, look what your daughter got me." Her daughter. By dessert, I was invisible again. They talked about the company, about new contracts, about a potential European partnership. I excused myself early, always rushing off, my mother said as I stood. "No wonder you're still single." I kissed her cheek. "Happy birthday, Mom." Outside, the night air was cool. I walked 3 blocks before I remembered where I parked. 3 weeks later, I was logging artifact records when the call came in. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the area code immediately. Hometown. I stepped out into the hallway. Miss Thompson said the voice. "This is Edgar Harrington from Harrington Winters and Associates. I'm your family's attorney." I felt my breath catch. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Physically, yes. But there's a matter that requires your presence. I'd like to meet in person. Tomorrow, if possible." "What is this about?" "I can't discuss it over the phone," he said, "but I assure you it's significant, especially to you." After we ended the call, I just stood there, phone still in my hand. My office door creaked open behind me. "Everything okay?" Gabriella asked. I told her what I could. "You have to go," she said. "I've got the Wilson exhibit opening next week." She raised an eyebrow. "Can't or won't because you're afraid to walk into that house again." She was right. The next morning I caught the 7:15 train. As the city faded behind me, I watched the landscape shift, glass buildings giving way to quiet roads and wide lawns. We passed the park where my father taught Natalie to throw a softball, the ice cream shop where she got 2 scoops and I got 1. "You need to watch your figure, Amelia." I remembered those words like they were stitched somewhere behind my ribs. I arrived just before noon. Harrington's office sat on the top floor of an old stone building downtown. Wood-paneled walls, rows of heavy books, and the faint smell of old paper, it all felt preserved in amber. The receptionist greeted me with a nod. "Mr. Harrington is expecting you." A clerk named Benjamin led me down the hall. "Interesting times," he said quietly. "We've been sorting through the old records, found some things no one's looked at in decades." He opened a door, gesturing me inside. I walked into a long, windowed conference room lined with portraits. At the far end, one photograph caught my eye, my grandfather Abraham standing beside my father, both in matching suits. I hadn't seen that image in years. The door opened again, and Mr. Harrington entered, tall, white-haired, with a calm face that didn't give much away. "Miss Thompson," he said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming on short notice. You made it sound urgent," I replied. He sat across from me and placed a thick file on the table. "Last week, while sorting through archived materials, we discovered a sealed envelope. It pertains to your grandfather Abraham's estate, and more specifically, to Thompson Construction." I leaned forward. "But that was decades ago. Why is it relevant now?" He adjusted his glasses. "Because it contains provisions tied to company ownership provisions that were never fully executed." I stared at him. "The documents suggest that the rightful heir to the company may not be who everyone believes it is." My heart beat faster. "I'd prefer to explain with your family present," he added. "I've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. All parties will be there. I'd still like to know what this is about." Harrington hesitated. Then he said, "Your grandfather's addendum outlines that the company must be passed down not just to an heir, but to the eldest female descendant of Thompson blood. There are conditions, and some of them may have been ignored." I didn't answer. I couldn't. As I walked out of the building, the wind picked up, blowing loose leaves across the sidewalk. The receptionist watched me as I passed. Her eyes lingered like she knew something I didn't. At my hotel that night, I lay awake again, but this time I didn't stare at the ceiling. I stared at the past, the one I'd lived, the one I thought was already written. Tomorrow morning, that story might change. The next morning, I arrived at Harrington's office just before 10. The receptionist gave me a stiff smile and gestured toward the conference room at the end of the hall. I walked slowly, heels muffled by the thick carpet, my heart thudding with each step. The door was open, and I could already see my family inside, seated quiet, waiting. My father sat at the head of the table, thinner than I remembered, his suit a bit loose around the shoulders. My mother was beside him, her spine-straight fingers twisting the pearl necklace she wore for every serious occasion. Natalie sat across from them, arms crossed, tapping one finger against her watch. "Finally," she said, when I entered, "some of us have businesses to run." I pulled out the chair farthest from them and sat. "Good morning," I said evenly. No one replied. The tension in the room was thick by the time Mr. Harrington walked in, followed by a younger man balancing 2 file boxes. He moved with deliberate care, placing the boxes near the far wall before returning to his seat at the center of the table. "Thank you all for coming." Harrington began adjusting his glasses. "As you were informed, we've uncovered documents that require immediate review. These concern the Thompson estate and the business holdings tied to it. This is highly irregular." My father said, his voice lower than usual, but still steady. "Whatever clerical issue this is, it can be fixed. No need for theatrics." Harrington didn't flinch. "It's not a clerical issue, Richard." He opened a file and removed a yellow document, setting it gently on the table in front of him. "This is an addendum to Abraham Thompson's will dated 1978. It directly addresses the future ownership of Thompson Construction." My mother shifted in her seat. "That will was executed decades ago. The company passed to Richard just as it should have." "Yes," Harrington replied. "But this addendum changes the conditions of what happens after Richard's stewardship ends." He took a breath and looked around the table. "Before I explain, you should know the company did not begin with Abraham. It began with Richard's great-uncle Thomas Thompson in the early 1960s. Thomas passed without children, and he left the company to Abraham under specific conditions. "What conditions?" Natalie asked, her tone tight. Harrington folded his hands. Thomas believed in something rather forward-thinking for his time. He stipulated that the company should eventually pass to the eldest female descendant carrying Thompson blood. He wanted a woman to inherit. My father went pale. My mother's jaw clenched. Natalie scoffed. "Well, that's still me. I'm the eldest daughter." "There's more," Harrington said. Thomas anticipated that future generations might try to work around his wishes. So he included a requirement DNA verification of biological descent before the final transfer. Natalie pushed back from the table. "This is absurd. No one else ever mentioned any of this." Mr. Harrington opened a second envelope. "During our review, we also found sealed hospital records. These were included with the addendum and appear to have been submitted by Abraham himself before his passing." My mother stood abruptly. "We are not discussing private medical information in front of Margaret," my father said quietly. "Sit down." She hesitated, then lowered herself slowly back into the chair. Harrington continued. "These records indicate that in January 1982, Margaret Thompson was admitted to Mercy Hospital following a miscarriage. In April of the same year, adoption papers were filed for a newborn girl, Natalie." The silence that followed seemed to pull all sound from the room. Even Natalie's hand stopped tapping. She stared at the folder in front of her like it might disappear. "No," she whispered. "That's not true." Harrington's voice was steady. "According to the hospital documentation and legal adoption forms, it is." Natalie turned to our parents. "You told me I was born early. You showed me pictures." My mother's voice cracked. "Those were taken later. We wanted you to feel like you were ours. You are ours." My father said nothing. His face was gray. "Which means," Harrington said gently, "Amelia, born in 1990, is the only biological female descendant of Richard and Margaret Thompson. Under the terms outlined by Thomas Thompson and reinforced by Abraham's will, Amelia is the rightful heir." My mouth went dry. I hadn't spoken a word since sitting down. Natalie shot to her feet. No, this can't be happening. I've worked at that company since I was 16. I've earned it. I've built it." Her voice rose. "This is just some technicality. You planned this. You always hated me," she spat, turning toward me. "You dug this up because you couldn't stand being second." I blinked, still trying to process what I'd just heard. "I didn't know." "Liar," she snapped. "You think this makes you better than me? You've always played the victim, always waited for someone to hand you something." She grabbed her purse. "This isn't over." My mother stood to follow her but paused at the door. "Richard, are you coming?" My father didn't move. "I'll be along." After they left, Harrington cleared his throat. "Miss Thompson, if you're willing, I'd like to begin reviewing the company documents with you this afternoon." I turned to my father. You knew the truth all this time." He didn't look at me. "Your grandfather showed me the papers before he passed. I thought if we ignored it, if we kept Natalie's position intact, none of this would ever come up. But then I was born," I said. "And instead of preparing me, you let me believe I wasn't enough." He looked at me, then really looked. "I didn't think you'd want it. You never showed interest in the business, because I was never invited to." He looked down at his hands. Mr. Harrington opened another folder. "There's a process, of course. Legal steps, asset evaluations, organizational structure. You don't have to decide anything today." My father stood. "I need to speak with Natalie." At the door, he paused. "I have cancer, Amelia. Stage 4. The doctors say 6 months, maybe less." He left without another word. I stayed at the table while Harrington laid out spreadsheets and titles and lists of subsidiaries. I nodded when needed, signed when asked. When I finally stepped outside, the air had turned cool. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the train station, still carrying that room with me. Everything I'd believed about my family, my place, the company, it was all different now. My phone buzzed. A message from Gabriella. What happened? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, not sure where to begin. I didn't go straight back to my hotel that afternoon. Instead, I drove toward the only place that made sense, the house. The estate sat quiet as I turned into the long drive, the trees casting shadows across the circular entrance. Everything looked exactly the same, but nothing felt the same. Natalie's Mercedes was parked half on the grass near the front steps. She never parked like that. I let the engine idle for a moment before shutting it off. Isabel opened the door before I could knock. Her voice was soft. "Miss Amelia, it's been a terrible morning. Shouting, crying." Miss Natalie broke a vase in the foyer. I stepped inside the quiet of the house, pressing in. "Where is everyone?" "Your mother's resting," Isabel said. She took something to sleep. Natalie went out to the pool house. Your father's in his study. I thanked her and made my way to the study. The door was shut, but I didn't wait for an invitation. I knocked once and stepped in. My father sat behind his desk, shoulders slumped. A glass of whiskey rested untouched beside him. He didn't look surprised to see me. "I suppose you have questions," he said. "About 30 years' worth." I sat across from him, same as I had dozens of times as a child. Only now I didn't feel like a child anymore. Why did you lie about Natalie? He exhaled slowly, like the words had been sitting too long in his chest. Your mother had 3 miscarriages. The last one nearly broke her. They said we'd never have children. Then a friend mentioned a private adoption. It was quick, quiet. Natalie was perfect. You pretended she was yours. We planned to tell her eventually, he said. But the years passed and it got harder. And when your mother became pregnant with you, well, that only complicated things. So you just kept the lie going. He nodded. By then, we'd built a world around it. And Natalie, she was everything I thought a successor should be. Ambitious, sharp. You knew about Thomas's will. I did? He admitted. Abraham showed me the clause. He warned me. I thought I could work around it. I sealed the records. We built a structure that would keep Natalie in control, regardless of bloodline. So you chose the daughter who wasn't yours, I said, and made sure the one who was stayed in the background. He didn't argue. Before he could speak again, the door burst open. My mother stood in the doorway, her hair slightly out of place, eyes red. How dare you come here, she said. I didn't know about any of this, I replied. I found out yesterday like everyone else. You could walk away, she said. Let Natalie keep what she's worked so hard for, but instead you'll take it all. This isn't about revenge. You wouldn't understand, she said bitterly. You weren't the one going through endless treatments watching test after test come back negative. Natalie saved us. And me, I asked. Where did I fit into that perfect picture? She faltered. You were unexpected, and that was my fault. She sat down suddenly, looking older than I'd ever seen her. We didn't know how to include you without changing everything. Natalie was already established. She had her path. You were quiet, distant, because I learned not to expect anything. Neither of them responded. The silence hung in the room like fog. Then the front door slammed loud enough to rattle the windows. Moments later, Natalie appeared in the study doorway. Her makeup was smudged. Her expression was sharp. Well, isn't this sweet, she said. The real Thompson family having a moment. Natalie, my mother started. Don't, she snapped. You lied to me my entire life. You're still our daughter, my father said. No, I'm your mistake. She turned on me. And you. I bet you're loving this. Your art degree finally paid off, huh? I haven't decided anything yet. Oh, please, she scoffed. You'll act all humble and then take everything. My father stood his hand trembling slightly. Enough, no, Natalie said. This is what happens when you hand the company to someone who can't read a spreadsheet. At least I wouldn't be embezzling, I said. The room fell still. My father's face paled. What did you say? 3 years ago, I said slowly. Christmas party. I overheard someone talking about missing funds. Natalie said it was nothing, just an accounting error. That's ridiculous, she said quickly. She doesn't know what she's talking about. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Actually, she might. Mr. Harrington stepped into the room, briefcase in hand. I asked Isabel to let me in. He set his case down and opened a folder. As part of the inheritance review, we found irregularities in company financials, offshore accounts, project overruns, vendor payments that lead nowhere. My father looked stunned. What is he talking about? Natalie hesitated, then said I was restructuring for tax purposes. Stop lying, my mother said quietly. I found out last Christmas. She promised to pay it back. How much, my father asked. Harrington answered, approximately $15 million. He sank back into his chair. 15. The company's worth more than that, I said. Harrington shook his head. Closer to 150, on paper. But with this and the pending lawsuits... What lawsuits, I asked. My father exchanged a look with Natalie. Standard contract disputes, he muttered. There are 17 active suits, Harrington clarified. Safety violations, material substitutions, breach of contract, potential liability could exceed $40 million. I looked at Natalie. What have you done? I did what I had to do, she said. Margins were tight, deadlines were impossible. It's the nature of the business. People could have been hurt. No one died, she snapped, and our lawyers can stall for years. I stepped back, trying to catch my breath. The company I was supposed to inherit was buried in secrets. So that's why everything was signed over quickly, I said. You knew this was coming. Neither of them spoke. Natalie crossed her arms. If you really care about this family, you'll sign it all back. I know how to fix this. You don't. And that's your pitch, I asked. Take it back so you can keep covering things up. She stepped closer. If you take this from me, I'll fight. I'll use everything I have. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. At the door, I turned to face them. I'll be in touch, I said. Through Mr. Harrington. Then I walked out past the portraits, the marble, the chandelier that never once made that house feel like home. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the hotel staring at the ceiling, the edges of everything still sharp in my mind, the silence in the study, the look on my father's face, Natalie's voice cracking with rage. The truth had shifted something permanent, and I couldn't unsee it now. By morning, I needed answers, not from lawyers or my parents, but from the records themselves. I drove across town to the climate-controlled storage facility my father had used for years. The passcode still worked Natalie's birthday, of course. The unit was clean, neatly arranged. Boxes were labeled in tidy handwriting years, and categories stacked like a private archive. I moved past Natalie, pageants and Richard, college mementos, until I found the boxes marked simply Abraham. One was heavier than the others. Inside were his cufflinks, his pipe collection, and a small leather-bound journal. I sat down cross-legged on the concrete floor and started to read. Most entries were brief meeting notes, observations, fragments of memory. But toward the back, one paragraph stopped me cold. It was dated just months before his death. Richard continues grooming Natalie despite knowing the clause in Thomas's will. She is sharp, yes, but she lacks the deeper character this company needs. The younger one, Amelia, has that blend of creativity and quiet resolve. She sees more than they realize. I only hope Richard wakes up before it's too late. I closed the book and held it in both hands. He had seen me, even if no one else had. The next morning, I met with Mr. Harrington again. We sat in the same conference room, only now the air between us felt different, less formal, more focused. The company's position isn't hopeless, he said, spreading out a set of ledgers and legal briefs. But it's fragile. The embezzlement created a financial vacuum, and the lawsuits are gaining traction. Public exposure could trigger penalties we're not yet prepared for. Do we know where the money went? We're working on it, he said. But the deeper problem is trust. Internally, the staff is anxious. Externally, clients are watching the headlines. And my father always said the company was worth $75 million. On paper, it's closer to $150, Harrington replied. But that could fall fast if the issues aren't addressed. I let that settle before answering. I want to see the company. Inside. Not just the numbers. He nodded. I'll make arrangements. That afternoon, I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. Amelia. Wow, been a minute. I need legal advice, I said. Professional, not personal. We met at a quiet coffee shop near the edge of town. I told him everything from the inheritance clause to the sealed hospital records to the offshore accounts. When I finished, he leaned back. So you're the rightful heir to a $200 million business, with 17 lawsuits, 15 million missing, and no formal training. Correct. And your father is dying, your sister's furious, and your mother thinks this is a social scandal. I gave a faint smile. Also correct. You've got 3 options, he said. Walk away and let the company collapse. Claim it and sell fast, probably at a loss. Or take control and try to fix it. And legally, it's yours. Clean and binding. He took a sip of coffee. But that doesn't mean you'll be welcomed. I nodded slowly. Thanks. Whatever you decide, he said, just make sure it's something you can live with. The next morning, I walked through the doors of Thompson Construction headquarters for the first time in my life. The receptionist blinked when I gave my name. Miss Thompson. As in, yes, Richard Thompson's daughter. She stood quickly. Right. Of course. Please wait here. A few minutes later, a woman appeared, mid-50s gray streaks in her sleek bun, a clipboard tucked under one arm. I'm Diana Fisher, she said. Executive assistant. I've been with the company for 23 years. I'd like to see everything I said. Departments, operations, the people. Diana nodded. Follow me. We spent the morning walking through 12 floors of glass, steel, and fluorescent light. Most people were polite but uncertain. A few looked worried. I recognized that look. It's the one you wear when you don't know where you stand anymore. At lunch, Diana and I sat in the executive lounge. I waited until the room cleared before asking, "Diana, you've been here longer than anyone. What's really going on?" She didn't answer right away. Then she set her fork down and said, "Follow me." She led me to a small office on the 3rd floor. She pulled a key from around her neck and unlocked a file cabinet I hadn't even noticed. "These aren't in the official records," she said, "but I've been keeping copies, just in case." The files she handed me were thick. Inside were breakdowns of project bids, cost overruns, vendor payments, and internal memos. There were notes about faulty materials used on the Riverside job payment slips to shell companies, even lists of safety violations buried in review drafts. "How long?" I asked. "It started about 5 years ago," Diana said. "Worse after your father began stepping back. But 3 years ago, Natalie started taking bigger risks. And the missing money, $17.3 million, she said. Some of it went offshore. Some went into a shell company, Thornton Ventures, a condo development in Florida. Natalie's name is all over it." I ran my fingers down the page. "3 sites are in active danger," she added. 1 bridge, 1 office tower, and a residential block. I was planning to go to the authorities next week. I stood by the window, the file still in my hands. This wasn't just bad business. This was danger. Real people. Real risk. That evening back in my hotel, I sat by the window for a long time watching the lights blink across town. A text from my mother arrived around 10. "Your father's condition has worsened. Doctors say weeks, not months. Whatever you're planning, please consider his peace of mind." I stared at the message. Then I picked up the phone and called Gabriella. "I think I'm going to do it," I said. "Take the company. Try to save it. You sure know? But I think it's the right thing." She was quiet for a moment. "Then do it. You've already done harder things." The next morning, Natalie called. "We need to talk," she said. "Riverside Park, 1 hour. Not at the house." When I arrived, she was sitting on a bench in jeans and a windbreaker, her hair in a low ponytail. No makeup. No performance. "I have an offer," she said. "I'm listening." "You give me the company. In return, I wire you $20 million. You walk away, no court, no press, and the lawsuit's manageable," she said. "You don't need to worry about that. That's part of the problem." She narrowed her eyes. "You think you can do this better?" I think the people who trusted our name deserve better." She stood, hands shoved into her jacket pockets. "You really believe I'm the villain in all this? I think you made choices that hurt people. I was trying to keep it afloat," she said. Dad was losing his edge. I picked up the pieces. We stood there for a long time, the river behind us, quiet and slow. "I haven't made a decision yet," I said. "You will," she replied. "Just know this, if you come after me, I'll fight." Then she walked away, her figure growing smaller as she disappeared into the trees. 3 days after meeting Natalie at the park, I got the call I knew was coming. My father had been taken to the hospital. The voice on the line was my mother's. "It's happening faster than they expected. They say weeks, maybe less." I drove straight there, heart steady, but hands clenched tight on the wheel. The hospital was quiet when I arrived, polished linoleum, soft murmurs behind glass doors, that sterile stillness that never felt quite real. Room 712. I found it at the end of the hall. My mother sat in the corner, perfectly upright in a stiff chair, a silk scarf around her neck. Natalie stood near the window, arms folded, staring out at the parking lot. My father looked small in the bed. His skin was pale sunken in places that once held strength. But when he saw me, he nodded. "Amelia," he said, voice thin. "You came." "I wasn't sure I would," I answered, pulling the extra chair closer. He gave a slow breath, like even that effort cost him something. "Have you made your decision?" "I have," I said. "But before I sign anything, I want the full truth on the table. Everything." I looked toward the doorway. "Mr. Harrington's on his way. And I've brought someone else with him." My mother's head snapped up. "What do you mean, someone else?" The door opened just then, and Edgar Harrington stepped in, followed by a man in a navy suit carrying a leather case. "This is Martin Reynolds," I said, "forensic accountant." Natalie moved away from the window, her voice already rising. "You're bringing accusations into a hospital room." "This isn't an ambush," I said calmly. "It's clarity. That's what this family has needed for a long time." Reynolds opened his case, laid out documents with quiet efficiency, and began to explain. Item by item, he walked through the findings: falsified vendor reports, offshore wire transfers, overlapping project budgets, construction delays, disguised as accounting errors. He was thorough, measured, and absolutely impossible to argue with. Thompson Construction, he concluded, is operating at a level of risk that cannot continue. If changes aren't made now, structural, legal, financial, the company may not survive the next 18 months. My father didn't speak at first. He stared at the ceiling. Then very softly he asked Natalie, "Is this true?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was trying to keep things moving. At first it was small, fixing a mistake, covering a delay. Then it all grew." "You said you could handle it," my mother whispered. "I thought I could," Natalie said. "I wanted to be enough for him, to be the daughter he saw in me. I thought if I could keep the company strong, everything else would fall into place." I sat quietly as they spoke. There was no satisfaction in watching it unravel. My father turned to me. "So what now? I'm taking control," I said. "Today." My mother shot up from her chair. "You'll ruin us. You've never run anything. You don't know how." "I know enough to stop what's killing the company," I said. "And I've already brought in people who can help." "And Natalie?" my father asked, voice dry. "I'm not cutting her out," I said. "She'll have a position director of client relations, oversight included, no access to accounts." Natalie blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "Yes," I said, "with real responsibility, but within limits. After everything I've done, because I think you're capable of more when you're not trying to control everything." My mother spoke again, voice tight. "And the lawsuits, the press, the embarrassment. We'll self-report the violations," I said. "Begin repairs on the affected projects. We'll settle where we need to. We'll clean it up even if it takes years." "That name," she said. "You're dragging it through the mud." "No," I said. "I'm pulling it out of the mud." The room went quiet again. My father watched me for a long time, then nodded. "You sound like your grandfather." "I found his journal," I said quietly. "He saw something in me that you didn't." He sighed. "You reminded me too much of my mother. Creative, sensitive, emotional. I thought those were weaknesses." I shook my head. "You punished me for traits I didn't choose." He looked down at his hands. "You deserved better." Natalie had moved back to the window. "I just wanted to belong," she said, "even if it wasn't by blood." "You do," I said, "but not without consequences. This is how it starts." Mr. Harrington stepped forward with the paperwork. I signed where he pointed. So did my father. The company in full was now mine. He looked up one last time, his voice almost gone. "Do it your way." 2 weeks later, he passed in his sleep. The funeral was small, formal. Business partners came in black coats and polite nods, murmuring condolences between sips of coffee. Natalie stood beside me. So did my mother. We looked like a united front, though nothing was fully mended. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work. I met with legal teams, engineers, PR advisors, and structural safety consultants. I sat through meetings I barely understood and asked questions no one had ever asked me before. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And for the first time, it felt like it belonged to me. The weeks after my father's funeral passed in a quiet rhythm I hadn't expected. There were no dramatic speeches, no final letters left behind. Just the silence of a man who'd built everything on control and passed without saying goodbye. I spent most of my time at the company headquarters. The first changes were immediate public statements about internal audits, a new compliance team, and the launch of emergency safety inspections across every active site. Clients called with concerns, investors bristled, but the staff, they stayed, and most thanked me in quiet, steady ways. Diana became my second pair of eyes. Every morning she handed me an updated checklist of priorities, legal risks, project timelines, budget reallocations. She never told me what to do, but her eyes always lingered an extra second on the items that mattered most. I hired outside consultants, brought in new engineers, held meetings with exhausted foremen who just wanted clear direction again. We paused 3 projects completely, including the Riverside development. That one was the worst. There were foundational concerns ignored for months. We pulled every worker from the site, rebuilt the timeline from scratch, and sent formal apologies to city officials. The press noticed. Some headlines were sharp: "Air takes over struggling Thompson empire." Others were cautious. But a few praised the transparency. I clipped those and pinned them inside a drawer I rarely opened. At home, things stayed complicated. My mother moved into a 2-bedroom condo near the park. She didn't invite me over, but she did call. Short conversations, mostly about the weather or health insurance paperwork. Once she asked if I'd sell the estate. I told her it was already listed. She didn't argue. Natalie took longer to settle into her new role. Her office was smaller now. No private bathroom, no executive assistant, just her and a clean slate. The first week she barely spoke during meetings. By the second, she'd started offering suggestions, measured, cautious but thoughtful. One afternoon, after a long client call, she stopped by my office. "I forgot how exhausting real work is," she said, rubbing the back of her neck. I didn't answer right away. Then I smiled just a little. "It's not so bad when you know it matters." She stood in the doorway a moment longer, then nodded and walked out. Progress wasn't instant, but it was real. We sold off several non-essential assets to stabilize the books. One of them was the family house. It closed quickly, bought by a quiet couple with twin boys and a Labrador. My mother didn't come to the final walkthrough. I did. I stood in the empty dining room one last time, the walls echoing without the weight of furniture or memory. The chandelier still sparkled. Before I left, I ran my fingers along the mahogany table one last time and whispered goodbye. We used a portion of the sale proceeds to fund a new community initiative, a scholarship program for students interested in construction, architecture, and engineering. We named it after my grandfather. The ribbon cutting was modest, no press, just a few students, a local teacher, and a plaque bearing Abraham's name. I gave a short speech. Natalie stood beside me, her expression unreadable. Later that evening, she found me in the parking lot. "He would have liked this," she said. "He believed in building something that lasted," I replied. She leaned against her car. "I've been thinking about everything." I waited. "When I found out I was adopted, I was 12, she said. I overheard them fighting. Mom said something about me not being really theirs. I never told anyone. You carried that alone." She nodded. "And when you were born, it was like proof that I could be replaced. So I worked harder, tried to be perfect, tried to make sure there'd be no room left for you." I looked down at my keys. "You succeeded. For a long time." "I know," she said. "And I'm sorry." There wasn't much else to say. But she didn't leave right away. We stood there until the sun dropped behind the tree line, neither of us moving. 6 months in, things felt lighter. The lawsuits were mostly settled. The worst safety violations had been resolved. We still had challenges, but they were honest ones now. Even our staff meetings changed. More voices, more collaboration. People stayed after to ask questions or offer ideas. That hadn't happened in years, Diana said. One morning I found Natalie already in the office, coffee in hand, poring over a client retention report. She looked up. "You know, I'm sleeping better these days." "Oh, yeah," she said. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending covering things up. "This feels different. Not easy, but better." I nodded. "That's how you know it's worth doing." She smiled. "Just a small one, but real. And for the first time since all of this began, I believed we could make it through." A year after I took over the company, we moved headquarters to a newly renovated space on the edge of the city's arts district. It wasn't as flashy as the old building downtown, but it felt right. Clean lines, open windows, quiet corners filled with books and blueprints. The Thompson name still hung above the entry, but now it stood for something different. We hung 2 portraits in the new executive conference room. One of my grandfather, Abraham, smiling in black and white sleeves rolled up beside the foundation of the company's first project, and one of me standing beside the scholarship board we launched last fall. Natalie helped choose the frame. She still worked in client relations, but now she ran her own meetings, took pride in her results, and most importantly, asked for help when she needed it. We didn't pretend everything had been erased, but we found a rhythm. Some weeks were better than others. Still, we moved forward. My mother adjusted more slowly. She visited the office once. It was brief. She brought cookies for the staff, said hello to Diana, and left without asking to see my office. But last Thanksgiving, she mailed me a card. No note inside, just a printed message, thankful for second chances. I kept it. There were still reminders of what we'd been. An old article that resurfaced in the papers. A former client who made a snide comment at a fundraiser. But each time, someone from our team stepped forward to speak on our behalf. Not because they had to, but because they believed in the work now. One afternoon in early spring, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought a folding chair, a small cup of coffee, and the latest company report. I read the numbers aloud even though no one was listening. Then I sat in the silence and watched the wind move through the trees. "I'm doing it my way," I said softly. "Not yours. Not Natalie's. Mine." And in that quiet, I finally felt free. I still think about how close I came to walking away, how easy it would have been to let the past win. But something told me to stay, to fight for the truth even when it hurt, even when it meant seeing my family for who they really were. And because of that, because I stayed, something better was built. Not just a company, but a life rooted in clarity, earned trust, and quiet strength. If you've stayed with me through all of this, thank you, truly. If there's something in your life that needs to be faced, no matter how long it's been buried, I hope you know it's never too late to stand your ground, to choose integrity, and to build something better. And if this story reminded you of someone or something in your own life, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to share or simply hold it close. Take care of yourself, and thanks again for listening.